Anin, Bonjour, and welcome. My name is Erica Daniels, and this is New World Ideas, Indigenous Innovations that Changed Everything. The moment the old world met the new, the process of globalization began. There was an exchange of ideas, cultures, and technologies. Old world ideas are well known and celebrated, but many new world innovations are often forgotten or taken for granted. This documentary celebrates Indigenous ideas that changed the world forever.
The Three Sisters Renewing the World, Food and the Secrets of Growing It.
My spirit name is Awanagabo. That is Anishinaabe, the fog that stands alone before the rain. And my clan is the Golden Eagle, Ginu clan. I'm going to share the story of the Three Sisters from my understanding with what has been shared with me. So a long time ago, we had Sky Woman, and Sky Woman came down to the earth to see Turtle Island. And as she came down, she gave birth to a daughter. And this daughter, she walked Turtle Island. And she got pregnant and had twin sons. Now in that process of having those twin sons, she unfortunately died. These three sisters came up from where she was buried: corns, beans, and squash.
History calls it the Neolithic Revolution. As early as 10,000 years ago, a social upheaval and cultural change that happened with the invention of farming. Indigenous peoples began domesticating wild plants, and the basis for villages, towns, cities, and civilizations began. Early Indigenous farmers manipulated an unpromising wild grass and created a foodstuff that would drive a civilization. A grain with endless variety, delicious and nutritious. The natives called it cooksy, the Spanish called it maize, and we know it as corn. Those Spanish conquerors were awed by the cities of Mexico, larger and more beautiful than anything in Europe, all fueled by maize, a food which yields more grain per acre than any other cereal crop.
The thing about corn is that it's completely a human invention, right? There's no such thing as wild corn. And the reason that we can't find wild corn is because it has been so completely bioengineered by some scientist 7,000 or 8,000 years ago. But recently, with the arrival of DNA testing, we've been able to determine that the wild ancestor of corn is teosinte. And the thing about teosinte is it looks nothing like corn. It is completely different from corn. And that gives us an idea just how much engineering the ancient people did in order to turn teosinte into maize.
Over time, Indigenous farmers developed amazing varieties: corn for eating, corn for feeding animals, corn to wear and to decorate, even corn to pop. And corn drove empire. Surpluses meant trade, and with trade, the secrets of the seeds were passed on.
But these three sisters are really close, and they're almost inseparable. And they kind of do everything together, and as they grow older, they begin to fight with each other. So the corn sister, upset with her other two sisters, the beans and the squash, she goes out into the field and she stands there. And as she's standing there in the sun, all proud, just standing straight up like that, her two other sisters see her out there and they become worried about her. The wind, the sun, all of these elements are withering away at their sister, the corn.
Ancient people had learned a great secret and developed a radical innovation: companion planting. Planting complementary crops together to ensure success, each growing better because of each other and together providing a perfectly nutritious diet. This method was known to the Indigenous people since the dawn of time as the Three Sisters.
So beans being as loving as they are, the bean sister, she wraps herself around her to hug her sister. But also that bean sister is important to our people because that bean provides nitrogen. So when she came to visit her sister, she started to feed her sister in that old way. The squash sister, also being very proud, she wrapped herself around them and they all began to weep and share that love together. Now that squash sister is important because her leaves grow big to block that soil, block the sun's rays from coming down and drying out that area. So that squash sister protected and kept them from being burnt and keep that moisture and humidity in the ground. Miigwech, Miigwech, I'm asking.
Going back 5,000 or 6,000 years into prehistory, you have these scientists, they're looking at the beans and looking at the corn, and they realize that when the beans are growing close to the corn, or when the beans grow, or the corn goes in the field after the beans, they actually do better. Together they do better. So the corn gives the beans structure. But more importantly, the beans suck nitrogen out of the air and deposit it in the soil. That's the same nitrogen that the corn needs to grow. And because of that, you don't have to think about things like crop rotation. You don't have to think about adding fertilizer to your ground, because those two plants growing together will do that. They form a good pair. Now, the squash has got a nice leafy canopy. And so the canopy of the squash will keep the ground around the corn stalk moist, so it won't dry out. You won't have to water as often. It's a brilliant answer to monoculture.
Those seeds and that knowledge would spread throughout North America on massive trade networks. From the great Mayan civilizations of Central America to the pyramid builders of Cahokia near present-day St. Louis, to the great Six Nations Confederacy of the East Coast, selected breeding and the development of new varieties spread the Three Sisters further and further afield. And as science is only now just discovering, the Three Sisters were even thriving in the short growing season of the North.
So yeah, they've exposed a large bison leg bone.
Here on the banks of the Red River in Lockport, Manitoba, archaeologists have made an important discovery, an ancient farm, the furthest north ever unearthed. Kevin Brownlee is digging in, helping University of Manitoba archaeology students unearth the past. What they found here has shattered preconceived notions.
What this site has really told us and demonstrated is First Nation people were growing crops here further north than anywhere else in North America. But the real, like, sort of the smoking gun would be the bone scapula hose, very unique, and finding those. Evidence of the storage pits, and storage pits are certainly associated with groups further to the south. They're very classic bell-shaped, which suggests you are growing surplus and you are storing stuff for future use. So it's not sort of the occasional appearance of a carbonized kernel of corn. They were actually here practicing agriculture, which is really quite fascinating.
Back in the lab at the Manitoba Museum, new science has pushed the limits of our understanding.
We can take an example here where we actually see this sort of what we would call pot scum. That's the scientific name for it. Basically the residue left over from cooking inside of these pots. And one of the interesting things is, as we started doing more and more work with this, we started finding evidence of corn showing up in places that we were not really expecting. So far, we found it showing up as far north as just north of Lake Manitoba in the Sipwisk Lake area, just downstream on the Nelson River from the top of Lake Winnipeg. So it's very interesting to see it sort of traveling to that distance. So we were able to get radiocarbon date, or an AMS date, off of the vessel, and then a thermoluminescence date. All scientific side of things, but the bottom line was it came back in about 1346 AD. So gave us a really precise date as to when this pot was used and made. And so it shows that there was corn being traded up into northern Manitoba back about 750 years ago. there was a massive trade network that was allowing the surplus being produced by groups to the south being moved up the waterways along the river systems into northern Manitoba. And so we start seeing this stuff showing up. And so part of that sort of balanced diet that people had before Europeans arrived certainly included corn for northern Manitoba, which I think was a little surprising to some of us working in that area. We keep looking now at more and more of these ponts from further and further field and looking for additional evidence of it. And I don't think it's a matter of if we're going to find it, it's like when we're going to find it.
Corn was not only grown widely in the New World, after contact, it spread everywhere. It was so successful, it even supplanted traditional Old World crops. There's more corn grown in China than rice.
New country cornflakes.
It has become the biggest cereal crop in the world, and it is in everything. From the cornflakes we eat to the box it comes in, from adhesives to yogurt, diapers to cosmetics, spark plugs to paint. But it was not just corn that changed things after contact. The potato was developed by the Incan Empire to grow in places other crops could not. Originally poisonous, early farmers developed hundreds of varieties that were incredibly nutritious and easy to grow. When brought back to Europe, this vegetable's incredible calories and ease of growth banished famine. King Louis XVI of France said, "France will thank you for having found bread for the poor." When Sir Walter Raleigh brought the potato to the Elizabethan court, he had no idea how it would change the landscape for countries like Ireland.
Really goes back to Walter Raleigh, and of course he was, apart from many other things, a buccaneer, a pirate. Of course he was knighted as Sir Walter Raleigh, and he owned an estate in County Cork. And so Raleigh got the potato and brought it back for Elizabeth I, and then brought it over to Ireland and planted it in County Cork. And it took off and became absolutely very, very fast growing and very quickly became a staple food. Tremendously nutritional, very high value, people could live on it.
Because potatoes require less land than wheat, but provide 3 times the food value, Ireland's population exploded. They became known as the Potato People. But its very success led to terrible consequences. The potato of Ireland was a clone, a monoculture. In 1845, a fungus attacked and destroyed the entire crop. More than 1 million people starved. More than 1 million people immigrated. Ireland's population was cut in half. It took decades for Ireland to recover, but the love of the potato in Ireland still survives.
Here we are having our fish and chips, still as popular as ever in Ireland as our potatoes. In fact, most of my friends, most of my family and the like, don't consider having a meal without having potatoes in some form or fashion. And so it's very much part and parcel of the Irish. And to this day, it's still as popular as ever. So God bless the potato.
When first brought back to Europe, this plant of the nightshade family was thought to be poisonous. But when a fashionable and influential queen loved a pizza made with tomatoes, the love affair between the tomato and Italian cuisine began.
A very famous pizza. This is and one of the simplest pizza there is. It's made just with tomato and cheese and basil.
Since 1968, Tony DeLuca has celebrated all things Italian with a specialty Italian food store, Italian cooking school, and the best Italian food in town.
These colors are a combination of the Italian flag. And there was a story behind it. There was a special lady in Italy that visited Naples, and she asked her aide to have some kind of a very light snack. And so the aide went to the chef, and the chef presented her with the special pizza, and she liked it so much that she stayed in Naples a few extra days to eat more pizza. And then the chef who created it asked her if she could name the pizza after her. So, Queen Margherita. became pizza margherita. You know, sometimes I wonder if the Italians starved before the Columbus brought the tomatoes back to Italy, because it has become one of the most widely used products in the Italian culture. I think that we owe a lot to the New World, and we should be thankful that they let us take the tomatoes back to Europe, and they became so popular, it changed our cuisine.
Chilies spiced things up for the food of the East, and curry became an international dish. Coffee fueled the cafe culture of Paris. Peanuts crossed over into Africa, and peanut oil became the essential ingredient in African food. And can you imagine a world without chocolate and vanilla? Although the world has enjoyed the benefits of indigenous food, it hasn't always been an equal trade. The process of globalization has absorbed the gift of indigenous foods, but ignored the innovation of the Three Sisters. More corn is grown to burn in our cars than for food, and our food is grown on such an industrial scale. Genetically modified, it requires more and more herbicides, pesticides, and irrigation than ever. There is a huge disconnect from the land. The lessons of the Three Sisters, companion planting, sustainability, and biodiversity are for the most part forgotten. Here at the University of Winnipeg Centre for Urban and Inner City Studies, Elder Priscilla Settee is determined to reclaim the Three Sisters' lessons. She is teaching a course on the Indigenous food sovereignty movement.
I'm really concerned about some of the health statistics in First Nations and Métis communities.
But she sees that food can be part of the solution.
Food also has a gigantic possibility to unite all of humanity. And so when we talk about Indigenous food sovereignty, we recognize the importance that Indigenous play, because we are the founders of most of the world's food sources, even though the history books don't tell us that. So we have and continue to take great leadership on waking the world up. We are the unrecognized leaders in many cases.
Her students share her passions and see that reclaiming Indigenous food can help to restore community health.
I think food sovereignty is vital for First Nations communities. Renewing that relationship with the land, because I think it's very important that we have to return to the land in order to really thrive and be healthy.
Today, they're enjoying a quick lunch before a tour of Nietzsche Commons, an Indigenous food store, restaurant, and gift shop in the heart of Winnipeg's downtown.
We try to market as much of the Aboriginal produced products. The fish, the wild rice is an example.
The director of Nietzsche Commons, Louise Champagne, admits that keeping a downtown Indigenous food store open has been a real challenge. But Nietzsche Commons is an inspiring example of how things can change.
The young people, including in this class, are the hope for our future. Like, we elders have had our times. Students and youth want to be part of the solution. To see the hope in the youth is phenomenal and very exciting. So in terms of the future, we don't have any choice. We have to create a sense of hope built on practice, built on renewing fellowship and neighborliness.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the Three Sisters Garden.
Here at the Niganin Center on the site of the old CPR station, student Samantha Bray is presenting to her fellow students an idea for a unique garden.
So the corn that we're planting today is the red Mandan corn from the Mandan Nation in North Dakota. These are examples of the corns that we're going to be growing today and planting.
They are creating a Three Sisters garden in the middle of a parking lot.
This morning I was teaching the students about the Three Sisters garden and how the corn, squash, and beans grow and thrive together, and how it was passed on through oral traditions and how we still have the possibility of having it here today. It's important to me because over the past 600 to 700 years, the First Nations people, they passed it on even despite all the challenges they faced, and it just amazes me that we still have it even though so many things have happened to the First Nations people. I love learning about it and I love teaching them about it, and I know they love learning it too, and they love the hands-on aspects of it. And I know that for them, anything connected to First Nations culture is just something they love learning. So I love teaching about it and I love learning about it too.
We just need to get some bags of compost and just dig it in, into the rolls.
Author and teacher Tabitha Robin is helping her friend, storyteller Lance Guibo, plant a Three Sisters garden in the schoolyard at the Black River Anishinaabe Nation. For them, the planting of this garden, according to the Three Sisters, is very important.
I think it's important to the Indigenous community because it's a resurgence of our culture, right? It's a way of looking backwards and honoring our ancestors and the traditional food practices of our ancestors in order to feed our people moving forward. It's just time. It's just time that there's focus on Three Sisters.
Those Three Sisters are important and influential to our people. These plants that are indigenous to North America are native to North America. When non-native settlers came to Turtle Island, they had this idea that they put in the people's heads that we didn't farm. Yet all of these traditional plants came from our people.
There's symmetry, right? There's symmetry between Indigenous knowledge and scientific knowledge. And we're just reclaiming that Indigenous knowledge. So for everyone, I mean, this is for everyone because we're really, we're at this time and point on this planet where things have to change.
Planting in this old way helps me reclaim a part of that identity, a part of that history, a part of my people that was silenced for a long, long time. One of those old ways of doing things. We're not just about songs and powwows and dances and pipes and ceremonies, but this too itself is a part of my people that's really important.
We can all agree, regardless, that we want to be able to eat clean food and enough of it to keep us well, because really that's what we're doing. That's what the Indigenous movement is doing. It's standing up for that. But that's an everyone issue.
That's exactly what this unique new restaurant in Winnipeg is doing. Feast features Indigenous, locally grown ingredients fused with modern style, prepared and served by Indigenous people.
So, how we doing back here, guys?
Owner Krista Bruna Gunther's intention is to serve body, mind, and spirit, along with the great food.
Today, I really wanted to promote our butternut squash, which is one of the Three Sisters. We make a bannock pizza, butternut squash bannock pizza that has roasted squash. We have pine nuts, which are also a traditional Indigenous ingredient. We have so many beautiful Indigenous ingredients here that grow right on our land. And I really wanted people to know what those are again and bring those back to the limelight. I think there's so much coming back with our culture. The food is something that needs to come back as well. The arts and the music and the languages are all things that are coming back, and it's time for the food to come back as well.
Oh, this looks delicious. Thank you.
There's no doubt we are one world. Sometimes in this mashup, good ideas can get lost. That's why it's so important to celebrate Indigenous innovations that can help us navigate through this new, old, one world. So, Gitchi Miigwech.